dying. I'm dying. I know I am. I have to get to the hospital right now. I started to realize that there was something really, really wrong. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was so shaky. I was so weak. And I realized that I couldn't feel my feet. When I glanced to the floor, I saw that my feet were purple. And when I glanced at my hands, I saw that my hands were purple. And when I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I saw that my nose, my chin, and my cheeks were purple as well. I was dying, and I knew it. I immediately began to panic. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was seeing tunnel vision. I was sicker than I could ever explain. As I lay in a coma, that the doctors diagnosed me with something called meningococcal meningitis, which is a vaccine-preventable blood infection. I was given less than a 2% chance of living and immediately put on life support. We have no idea how I got it, so for all I know, somebody could have sneezed on me when I was in the elevator at work, and maybe that's how I got it. But due to this little microscopic bacteria, over the course of 2.5 months, I ended up losing my spleen, I lost my kidney function, I lost the hearing in my left ear, and due to the septic shock that my body went into, I ended up losing both of my legs below the knees. My life changed like that. I went from being a normal 19-year-old without a care in the world to now relying on machines, mechanics, and medical innovation in order to live and in order to even survive. And I thought the worst was over. That is, until I saw my new legs for the very first time. They were these bulky blocks of metal with pipes bolted together for the ankles. I don't know who designed these feet, they try to make them look real, but they look like they were straight out of the plumbing department of Home Depot. They were hideous. And with my mom by my side and just tears streaming down our faces, I strapped on these chunky legs and I stood up. I was absolutely physically and emotionally broken. The thought of living the rest of my life with these hunks of hardware as my legs was depressing and overwhelming. And little did I know at that time that my biggest loss, my legs, would eventually become my biggest asset. But I think as soon as I got so sick and tired of being sick and tired, I knew that in order to move forward with my life, I had to somehow learn how to let go of the old Amy and somehow learn to embrace the new Amy. And that is when it dawned on me that the old Amy, was maybe 5'5", but the new Amy, she could be 6 foot tall. I could be as tall as I wanted, or I could be as short as I wanted, depending on who I was dating at the time. It was times like these that first prompted me to ask myself, if my life were a book, and I was the author of that book, how would I want this story to go? I saw myself walking gracefully, and I saw myself somehow helping other people through my journey, and I saw myself snowboarding again. And I didn't just see myself carving down this mountain of powder, I visualized it so strongly that I could actually feel it. I could feel the wind against my face and the beat of my racing heart as if it was happening in that very moment. And that passion and that fire that I felt inside, that is when a new chapter of my life began. I was back up on a snowboard 4 months after losing my legs, although things didn't go quite as expected. I hit this bump completely out of control, and I fell, and my goggles went one way, and my beanie went the other way, and my legs, still attached to my snowboard, went flying down the mountain. And meanwhile, I was still sitting up on top of the mountain, completely embarrassed. I wasn't expecting that at all, and actually I heard a lady scream from the chairlift, which I'm sure she racked up years of therapy bills. Anyways, I remember I was just so discouraged, and I could have easily thought, well, this is impossible. I obviously can't snowboard with 2 prosthetic legs. But I thought, if I could figure out a way to get my legs to move in the way that I need them to, and if I could figure out a way to keep these detachable body parts attached to my body, then I would be able to do this again. And that's when I learned that the obstacles and the challenges in our lives can only do 2 things. One, stop us dead in our tracks, or two, force us to get creative. So I decided to make a pair myself. My leg maker and I, we put random parts together and we made a pair of feet that I could snowboard in. And believe it or not, these babies actually worked like a charm. But it was these legs and the best 21st birthday gift that I could ever receive, a new kidney from my dad, that allowed me to follow my dreams and to snowboard again. And then I went on to be the first ever female to win a bronze medal in Paralympic snowboarding. Thank you. I've learned it's that change and it's that challenge that forces us to figure out what we're really made of. It makes us dig deep. It makes us find our fire, and it makes us get creative, because that's the only way to reach beyond the reality of this current moment, is by accepting what is, but most importantly, daydreaming of what could be. If you asked me today if I would ever want to change my situation, I would tell you guys no. Because my legs haven't disabled me. If anything, they enabled me. They forced me to rely on my imagination and to believe in the possibilities. And that's why I believe that our imaginations are huge tools for breaking through all the borders in our lives, because in our minds, we can do anything and we can be anything. It's believing in our dreams and facing our fears head on that allows us to live our lives beyond our limits.
When I walked out here, I got to be honest, I was pretty nervous. I hope I didn't, bomb this. Because last time what happened? So on the screen, you were going to see my best friend, my wife Kelsey. She winds up telling me with excitement and fear that she's pregnant. 9 months go by and my daughter's born. And the reason I know that my wife is the best in the world is because when I looked at my wife and I said, what do you want to name her? You think Madison or Avery? She looked at me and said, no, we have to name her Chloe Lynn, don't we? And I said, we don't have to do that. Why would you even think that? And she said, because you idiot, you already got your ex-girlfriend's name tattooed on your arm. Yeah. So we named her after my ex-girlfriend. It's not true. It's not true. No, my ex-girlfriend's the devil, but it's on. So everything's going my way. I'm coming up with my third deployment. I gotta go over to Afghanistan for my third time. Started putting our stuff on like normal. As we're going over what we're gonna do, we're strapping our gear on. We go out with the minesweeper and we start sweeping the ground back and forth. Back and forth, nothing alarms us there's anything there. I take my backpack off and I set it on the ground. It hits the ground, and underneath it is a bomb. And it takes my right arm, right leg automatically. They rush me into surgery, right? We're gonna fast forward into the surgery here. And they cut my left leg off because it's already gone. And then 2 days later, they have to cut my left arm off because the skin and neck are tied. So I'm a quadruple amputee. 3 days later, I arrived at Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland. My wife came up to me, right? And I saw her. When I finally got the chance to talk to her, I said, Kelsey, you don't have to do this. Take the house, take the cars, take whatever money we have saved up and go. This is not the life I would choose for you. And she thought about it and she said, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. And then she came around and she said, you know what? Handicap parking sounds enticing. I'm gonna stay. But if you can imagine, she actually at 23 and I'm 25 and our daughter's 6 months old said, you know what? I'm gonna be here. We're gonna get through this together. So I'm at Walter Reed and I'm trying to recover. I had to find motivation, but I find motivation in my wife and my daughter. And all of a sudden there's a brotherhood at Walter Reed. A robot walked into my room and the first thing out of this guy's mouth was, hey man, welcome to the club. I said, I want to be in your club. He said, kind of late now, don't you think? I said, oh, you got me there. And his name was Todd Nicely. He showed me that with hard work and determination, I could walk again. And two things went off. Number one, this guy showed me the way that I can get better. I can still be there for my family. And number two, he's a Marine. And if a Marine can do it with how dumb they are, So the things I wanted to accomplish, I wanted to be able to feed myself again. I wanted to be able to pick a fork up and put food in my mouth. You see, I couldn't do that for 5 weeks. At 5 weeks, I was out of my recovery stage enough where I was healed up and I could grab a fork. I also was tired of sitting in a wheelchair. I thought, you know what, I want to be able to walk again. So 7 weeks and 4 days into my recovery, I took my very first steps at Walter Reed. It was very painful, it was not easy. And as I was walking around the track, they said, you'll walk 1 lap today. And I went ahead and walked 3 laps that day. And when I got done, I sat down, took a breather, and realized this could be something that I do. Now the next thing, ladies and gentlemen, is my hand. And this thing's the coolest thing in the world. On the screen, you're gonna see the most important hand that I own, right there. It's not the one I'm wearing, no, that one. That one's called a greifer. That hand is in a Crown Royal bag on the top shelf of my closet. Yeah, and nobody touches that hand because that hand closes 25 pounds of pressure. And you see my daughter is 7 years old. Yeah, in 9 years, Johnny's gonna come knocking at the door. And he's gonna be like, hey bro, like, did you just bro me, Johnny? That's 25 pounds of pressure. He's like, oh dude, that hurts. Johnny, there's no strike 2 and 3. This is 2 and 3 right here. Crunch. I break his hand. I know, sad. He's like, let me go, let me go. I pull Johnny close. I don't let him go. No. I say, Johnny, guess what? I don't know what. No fingerprints, Johnny. Remember that, Johnny. When I got blown up and I was down and out and I was wondering why did this happen, I was embarrassed, I was angry, I was questioning, am I a bad person? Does God hate me? And the biggest question I honestly had, ladies and gentlemen, was why didn't I just die? Why did I live through this? And I found the answer in my family. And I found the answer in Todd Nicely, that corporal that came to see me that was retired from the Marine Corps, that told me I would be fine. So I decided I was going to talk to everybody I could that was at that hospital. And at Walter Reed, amputees are what you normally see. And me missing all 4 limbs, that was the worst you were gonna see. So I'd go room to room, and I'd say, hey, I'm Travis, you're gonna be fine. Same message Todd gave me from that experience. Some people found out I did that. I became known as the mayor of Building 62, and they made a documentary on me. I don't think my problems outweigh anybody else's. I am fortunate to live in a nation where I can wake up in the morning with no arms, no legs, strap my legs on, right, throw my arm on, go in the elevator and go out, and live life to the fullest. Take my wife and my daughter wherever we want to go. The 2 life lessons that I have learned that I want you to go and pass along to everybody that you meet is number 1, don't dwell on the past. I learned that because when I was sitting in my hospital bed, closing my eyes and wishing that this did not happen, I realized you're not going to change the past. I can't change what happened yesterday, and I can't change what happened 6 years ago in Afghanistan. So I reminisce the 25 great years I had with legs and arms, and I've had 6 pretty great years without them. But with that experience and so many more, is you can't always control your situation. But I can always control my attitude.
I lived in death for 10 days. I was on a training bike ride with my fellow teammates, headed for the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary. As we made our way up to the beautiful Blue Mountains west of Sydney, it was the perfect autumn day. We'd been on our bikes for around 5.5 hours when we got to the part of the ride that I loved, and that was the hills, because I loved the hills. I looked up to see the sun shining in my face, and then everything went black. Where was I? What was happening? My body was consumed by pain. I'd been hit by a speeding truck with only 10 minutes to go on the bike ride. I was airlifted from the scene of the accident. I'd broken my neck and my back in 6 places. My whole right side was ripped open and filled with gravel. My head was cut open across the front, lifted back, exposing the skull underneath. I had head injuries, I had internal injuries, and I had massive blood loss. For 10 days, I drifted between 2 dimensions. I was in the fight of my life. After 10 days, I made the choice to return to my body. And when I did, the massive internal bleeding miraculously stopped. The next question was whether I would walk again, because I was paralyzed from the waist down. I woke up in intensive care to the news that the operation had been a success, because at that point, I had a little bit of movement in one of my big toes. And I thought, great, because I'm going to the Olympics. But then the doctor came over and said to me, matter-of-factly, Janine, the operation was a success, but the damage is permanent. Their central nervous system knows and there is no cure. So although we think you may get some feeling back from the waist down, you will have internal injuries for the rest of your life. You will have to use a catheter, and if you walk again, it will be with calipers and a walking frame. You're going to have to rethink everything you do in your life because you are never going to be able to do the things you did before. I was an athlete. My body was everything. If I couldn't do that, if I wasn't that, then who was I? After almost 6 months, it was time to leave the spinal ward. I was in a wheelchair and a plaster body cast. All I wanted to do was to go home and get my life back and learn how to walk. But the head nurse at the hospital had said, Janine, I want you to be ready because when you get home, something is going to happen. She said, you're going to get depressed. I said, not me, not Janine the machine. She said, it happens to everybody. I was in a wheelchair, a plaster body cast, attached to a catheter bottle. I had no feeling from the waist down. I wanted my life back. I wanted to put my running shoes on and run out the door. But I couldn't. And I got depressed. And there were days when I didn't want to get out of bed and days when I didn't get out of bed. And I can remember my mum sitting on the bed and we were both crying and she said, I wonder if life will ever be good again. And I thought, how could it? Because I've lost everything that I valued. At home, sitting outside in my plaster body cast, an aeroplane flew over my house. And in that moment, my eyes and my mind were open. I stopped asking, why me? And I began to ask, why not me? And I looked up and I thought, well, that's it. If I can't walk, then I might as well fly. So weeks later, my mum and my friend Chris, they bought me a pair of baggy overalls and they drove me to the local airport, Bankstown Airport, and they carried me in. And I held onto the counter because I couldn't even stand on my own. I said, I'm here for my flying lesson. And they ran out the back to draw short straws. Oh my God. And this guy came out, Andrew. He said, hi, I'm going to take you flying. I said, great. So they put me in the car and they drove me down to the tarmac. And there on the tarmac was a red, white and blue airplane. I had never seen anything so beautiful before. They lifted me up into the aircraft. They put me in the front seat. They did my seatbelt up. He got a clearance from the tower and he took off down the runway. And as the wheels lifted off the runway, I felt the most incredible sense of freedom. And then as we flew over the training area at Bankstown Airport, Andrew said to me, he said, right, you see those mountains over there? And I said, yes, as I looked towards the Blue Mountains west of Sydney, where my journey had begun. And he said, you take the controls and you head towards those mountains. And I did. And I was flying. And I knew right then that I was going to be a pilot. I didn't know how on earth I'd ever pass a medical, but that didn't matter because I had a dream and nothing was going to stop me. All I could do in the beginning was lie on the ground and lift my legs this far, maybe an inch, but it was better than nothing. And I practiced my walking as much as I could, and I went from the point of 2 people holding me up to 1 person holding me up, to the point where I could walk around the house holding onto the furniture as long as it wasn't too far apart. So while the doctors continued to put my body back together again, I went on with my theory study. And then amazingly, eventually, I passed my pilot's medical. And I had my bag of medication and catheters and my funny walk, and they would look at me and think, who is she kidding? She's never going to be able to do this. And sometimes I thought that too, that there was something inside of me that was burning so bright that said, don't stop. And eventually, I learned to fly. I went for my first solo and I got my private pilot's license. And then I learned to navigate. I flew around Australia and I got my unrestricted private pilot's license. And then I learned to fly in bad weather as well as fine weather, and I got my instrument rating. And then I got my commercial pilot's license. And then I got my instructor rating. And then I found myself at that same school where I'd gone for that very first flight, teaching other people how to fly. In just over 12 months after I'd left the spinal ward. I wasn't meant to live, I wasn't meant to walk, and I wasn't meant to fly. Our bodies may be limited, but it's our spirit that's unstoppable. I now know that it wasn't until I let go of who I thought I was that I had the freedom to create something completely new for my life. It wasn't until I let go of the life I thought I was supposed to have, that I'd worked so hard for, that I was able to embrace the possibilities that waited for me. I now know that my real strength never came from my body. Unlike anything you can lose in life, the defiant human spirit remains steadfast. And of this I'm certain. I am not my body. And you, my dear friends, are not yours. When you choose courage in the face of fear, you defy the things that hold you back from greatness. It's a daunting task. And you might well ask, where do I begin? Where do I start? Well, perhaps the simple words of this poem might offer a clue. He said to build a better world. I said I would, but how? The world is such a cold, dark place and complicated now. For I am small and helpless. There's nothing I can do. He said, of course there is. Just build a better you.